Got 1 minute.
Okay.
I spoke to Andy a few moments ago. He is hoping that he's going to be joining in. He, I'm not sure that the plane took off from Atlanta on time, so he said he would really work hard. But he knew Aaron was going to fill in without any questions.
I dropped a bowl.
Well, fortunately, I think everything looks really good as far as the landscape, Old Town.
So
Oh, thank
I
you.
can do a little conference call here. But I saw
I think we could start any time.
a call
Okay.
for a little bit.
Oh, I
Ready?
guess I should, I'm sorry, I need to share my screen.
Good evening and welcome to the September 8th meeting of the City of Charleston's Design Review Board, once again virtual. My name is Erica Chase, the board's chairperson. The members of the board with us tonight are Jeff Johnson, Dinos Leolio, Michelle Smith, Kristen Kraus, Aaron Stevens, and Andy Smith may or may not be joining us. He was traveling and wasn't sure if he'd make it to his destination in time. Members of the city staff with us are David Meeks and Linda Bennett. Agenda item number 5, 1545 Savannah Highway has been removed from the agenda for staff review. Dinos Leolio and myself will be recused from agenda item number 4, and Jeff Johnston will chair item number 4 and 5. The order of the meeting will be as follows. David will give an introduction of the project in context for any new projects. The applicant will then make the project presentation. We typically limit those to 10 minutes in person. Virtual, we're a little bit more flexible, but if you think you'll need a significant amount of time beyond 10 minutes, please let us know at the start of your presentation. If all presenters, if you could please clearly state your name for the record. We will then open the meeting up for board questions and then typically public comment period, but we do not have any members of the public that are registered to speak this evening, nor did we receive any emails or letters from the public. City staff will then give recommendations, and then the applicant and project team may respond or clarify to any city comments that are inaccurate. Board will then have time for discussion, and the project team may only speak if asked a question or acknowledged by the board or staff, and then we will take a motion and a vote by the board. If you could please silence all cell phones at this time. Not going to talk about public comment since we have none tonight. And then here is kind of our virtual meeting protocol. And again, I'll just cover what's applicable tonight. Staff will be controlling the PowerPoint presentation, and that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. I'll skip over public comments for the board. Let's see. And for the board members being recused from any items will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. Staff will be issuing meeting results, including staff comments and board motions to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website that's listed on the screen. And for additional contact information is on the screen as well. And I do want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. So with that, we will get started with item number 1, 1861 Bohicket Road, requesting preliminary approval for an addition to the existing Hot Gap Middle School.
Thank you. This is David Meeks. I don't have any context for this since we saw it last time. And Linda, if you could go ahead and unmute Emma Souter. I'm going to turn it over to Emma to start with the presentation.
Already been done.
Yes, I think I am unmuted. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Emma Souter from Red Iron Architects, and I don't think we will need additional time to present. This is an addition to the existing Hawk Gap Middle School that we reviewed last time. Next slide. Wanted to go over, next slide. Next slide. This is the existing site showing this existing school and the drop-off loop in the front and the bus parking loop in the back. Also the trailers in the back. Next slide. Again, this slide is not quite showing correctly on my screen, but should be a red box indicating the area where we're going to be doing the addition. Next slide. Wanted to start with the responses to the comments that we got last time. Starting with comment number 2. Comment number 1 was more of a statement, so I'm going to skip that one. But comment number 2 was that there's a requirement that roof mechanical systems are not visible from the ground in other parts of the building. So this slide is showing where we have the units located on the roof and showing the views from the street that you cannot see these units. They're actually hidden by more than a 7-foot high difference between the high part of the addition and the low part of the addition where the roof units are located. And there is a roof plan attached further on sheet A 1.33 showing the roof plan. So our response is that all new mechanical equipment for the addition will be screened by the 1.5-story rooms that surround the front and side. Next slide. DRB comment number 3 was, if possible, staff would like to see an added planting strip along the south foundation between the building and the sidewalk to soften the edge of the building, and wanted us to substitute for 2 of the plants, the pittosporum and the loropetalum. So next slide is our response to that. We were able to accommodate the planting on that on the vertical side there, the green and the vertical next to the band room and the chorus room. But we were having difficulty on the south elevation. And we're proposing to add planting in that front area, in front of the parking, in that green area below the building. And this would soften the edge from the view driving in, and also from the street. This building is very far set back from the street, and we think that this was a good option because we would have to lose a lot of parking to accommodate that area of planting. We're also substituting Sherwood Abelia to replace the pittosporum, and the curly leaf ligustrum replaces the loropetalum. So that was our plan to soften the building at those elevations. Next slide. This is a rendering showing what that would look like with the planting on the right there and at that area where David is pointing to. Next slide. This is showing our previous rendering at the top slide without the planting, and the slide below shows the planting, the new planting that we're proposing. Next slide. This is the fly-through of the building, and hopefully it'll work this time. We sent along an MP3, and it's embedded in that presentation, so I don't know if you're looking at
If I could interrupt, this is embedded, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the fly-through. And I did send it to the board. They may have already seen it. But let me Let me see if I can pull up the animation here. There we go. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So this is the existing building. That's the existing front entrance with the canopy. And then the large box on the right-hand side is the existing gymnasium. And the new work is everything to the right after that. So yes, this area is the new addition. So we're using the existing language of the school and the existing materials, we're matching them exactly. And this is also showing the new planting.
Okay. All right. Going back to the presentation. Okay.
Okay, next slide showing the exterior of the building, some renderings. This is the north building rendering of the elevation and the west building below it, indicating all materials, and we're matching the existing exactly. Next slide. Some more rendered elevations showing the east, the south, and the west elevations rendered. Next slide. This is just showing what the existing brick is. It's like a brown and orangey red that we have matched exactly. Next slide. And this is the exact bricks that we had the brick wrap go out there and match. It's palmetto red wire cut utility, the dark gray wire cut, and an accent is the palmetto buff stone. All grout, again, will be matching exactly as well. Next slide. This is the windows color to match existing. This is just the product we're using. Next slide. The ACM panels, color to match existing. Next slide. Storefront, match existing. It's clear anodized aluminum. Next slide. And this is our set of our construction documents. I don't think you want me to go through each of these sheets. It's a hefty set here. But just calling attention to roof one, or sheet A 1.33 that shows the roof plan and the units, and sheet A 3.01, which are showing the sections. That also shows the rooftop package units.
Would the board like to see the roof plan? I'm not sure how far down it is.
Yeah, you've got a ways to go there. You're
Okay.
looking for A 1.33.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Mhm. And do you want me to go to the next one you mentioned?
A 3.01 is the sections.
A 3 point?
0.01, yes.
Okay.
And that gives you an idea of how much larger the story and a half is that surrounds the area where the mechanical units are located.
Anything else?
No, unless there are any questions.
Thanks, Emma. Any questions for the applicant and team?
Don't have any.
I don't have any either.
Okay. We do not have any public comments. So David, staff recommendations, please.
Okay. The applicants have addressed the board and staff comments from the previous meeting Regarding the roof mechanical, the applicant has stated that the addition will screen the added mechanical on the roof. Some foundation plantings were added, but the applicant was not able to reconfigure the site of the building to accommodate planting strip along the front foundation, but they did add more planting directly south of the front foundation in the parking lot islands, which staff can support. And the 2 plants, the board asked the applicant to substitute with other plants. The applicant has done so. Also, the applicant is showing decorative traffic signposts, which is a DRB requirement, but the note says to coordinate the color with the construction manager, but DRB requires that the signpost be painted black or Charleston green. If you could just note that on the drawings next time. But with that, staff does recommend preliminary approval.
Thanks, David. Emma, do you have anything to respond to? I don't believe you do, but wanted to check.
No, but we're happy to add a note to paint the signpost black or Charleston green.
Got it. Thank you. Board discussion and a motion.
This is Dinos. Again, as I stated last time, I think the architect has done a very nice job coordinating with the original building design. With the addition, I really have no issues whatsoever.
And this was the first time I'd seen this design, and I agree with you. It's definitely within keeping. It's a nice looking design, good addition. And I would, I'd make a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments 2 and 3.
And I'm happy to second that.
Hold on,
Dinos?
Jeff, there's only comments 1 and 2. There's no 3 for
I'm
staff.
sorry. Right, then staff comments 1 and 2.
I have the number wrong. Oh, no.
I think 1 doesn't really have, does 1 have anything?
I'm
think
sorry,
we
I'm
can
looking
staff comment.
at the previous comments. I apologize.
I think 2 would be the only applicable actual comment.
Okay, staff comment number 2.
All right, so we have a motion by Jeff for preliminary approval with staff comment 2. Is there a second?
Dinos seconds the motion.
Thank you. I will call roll. Michelle? You're muted.
Sorry.
That's
Yes,
okay.
I vote to approve this application.
Kristen?
Approve.
Erin?
Yes, in favor.
And myself, yes, in favor. Thank you very much.
Sorry, yes, in favor, just to be accurate.
All right, next item on the agenda is 2280 Henry Teklenberg Drive, requesting conceptual approval for the construction of a new 1-story dialysis center.
Just a few more minutes. Almost there. There we go. Okay, again, we saw this one last time, so I don't have any context slides. So I'm going to turn it over to Randall Dover to speak.
Mr. Dover, are you there?
Let's see. Or Jack Wood.
He is not
Maybe-
there.
Is everybody unmuted?
Here, I got it. On me.
Great, we can hear you
Up
now.
here, I may be a mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay.
There's an echo on your,
Yes, this is going to be terrible. Hold on.
Are you using both your phone and your computer?
Yeah. Hold on. Now we go. Yeah. How about now?
much better,
Good.
thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyway, we've come back, really restarting the conceptual process with you guys. This
Could
is
you state your name for the record, please?
yeah, Randall Dover with Randall Dover Architect.
Erica, just to let you know that Andy has joined us now.
Okay.
We have a quorum there. This is for a dialysis clinic to be located on Henry Teklenberg Drive. The site that we're looking at is lot 7D. It's next door to the memory care facility that was recently built. The lot's 2.39 acres. We show 41 parking spaces. And I would note that there's no slope of over 3% in any part of the driveway. We're working with the new flood guidelines. You know, the building elevation finished floor has to be 2 feet above the floodplain. So that's why we are where we are. The building is 13,456 square feet. It contains 30 treatment stations for dialysis patients who are primarily dropped off. It's a 1-story building. If you want to move to the drawings there further back, David, we can get a couple of these. This landscaping plan, it's being provided by Johnson Lashaber, and they're dealing right now. They've already started the process with TRC as well. So y'all will all have a shot at that, but it's all indigenous plants, and it's all stuff that we think will comply with all your requirements for landscaping. That's the intent. Next page, I guess. That shows the footprint, actually the plan of the building within that footprint. Next page. Oops. Okay, this is our primary architectural site plan. It's a little cleaner for you to be able to see essentially how cars come onto the site, they turn and drop off patients and then leave. The way these facilities are set up, patients are there for a 4-hour treatment. So not a lot of patients drive themselves. In fact, it's pretty rare. Most everybody, a lot of them are handicapped or in need of help getting in and out of the building. So everything at that drop-off area is covered and is flat. Most of the items like a generator and dumpster and all those things that are required for this particular building are all located in the back away from public view. They'll all be screened both with their own screening, materials and stuff like that, as well as landscaping. And in the back, we have the detention area that's further on back. Next page, couple pages here. These show some of the screening elements. There is a little gazebo-like pavilion for the staff to go outside and sit for a little while in between shifts. And then we have dumpster enclosures and things like that in there. Again, all the materials on these items will match the materials that are on the building. You can go to the next page. Again, additional details there we're working with. Next page. This is our basic floor plan. Client loves this. They like what we have. It takes care of an existing clinic they have in the area that's over 20 years old that is absolutely dilapidated. So they need to get this up and running, and that's what we're trying to do. Go to the next page then. Roof plan. There's a higher roof area on the right side that reflects the plan itself. That's the primary treatment area, which is it'll have a 10-foot 6-inch ceiling throughout that whole area. That part of the building is a little bit taller than the rear of the building. All mechanical units will be screened with parapet walls around that area that are about 4 feet tall. This should have something like 10 or 11 small rooftop units that'll take care of a lot of small zones. That's typical for these, so we can control the temperature and the environment for these patients. Next page. Okay, the latest elevations, and it's hard to see in this. I'd go into the colored elevations, probably see it better. Another page or two. Well, this is a comparison between our building on the left and the existing memory care facility on the right. Next page. Okay, so what we're looking at now in terms of design elements now, we're looking at a base, a middle, and a top, but also mostly in one white brick color for most part. I've got a brick projection at the base to kind of create a rustication there that kind of creates that base element down through there in the bottoms of columns and stuff. And then white brick above, and then we've got a fairly flat roof with pediments, around it. The tan areas you're seeing there, it's a Nichiha wood panel in a spruce color. It's a light wood. and that stuff is bulletproof. We've used it quite a bit around the country and had good success with that, both waterproof, windproof, and damage proof. It won't rot, it won't bend, it won't cause any problems for us. The overall building height now is at the highest point is only 24 feet tall. And I would think at this point too, I guess, you know, where we are sited on the property, you know, the patient area is on the north end of the building. Again, we have recesses for all those patient areas. We want those windows to be left open as much as possible. So we're creating a little bit of a shading with the overhangs at all of those. In particular, they're in there all day long with able to look out the windows. That's a good thing. We don't want to have to pull the blinds down and close them off. There will be landscaping all around this building too, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of sunlight coming through those windows directly at low pitches at east and west anyway. And I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to tell you at this time. We're looking at probably putting one sign on the building, and where you see the bottom elevation there on that 4.4 or whatever that was. Oh, there it is there, the view from the driveway. We were looking to put something there. As you come up the driveway or up the road, you can see that sign location probably better than anything. Over on the front really is, you know, parallel with the road. It's kind of hard to see. And I can answer questions or tell you whatever you want.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Dover?
Erica, this is Dinos. This is really more of a request of David. Were there not before and afters, prior submittals, this submittal, as a part of their package that you might be able to share?
That's what we're looking at here. I do have the previous and current right here.
There you go, I missed that.
Other questions?
Yes, if I may ask Randall.
Please.
The parapet is particularly high. Is that to hide the mechanical systems on the roof?
Yeah, primarily that is what we're using those for.
Okay. What is the height of your mechanical units?
They're about 4 feet.
Therefore, and what is the height of your parapet?
4 feet.
Any additional questions?
I'm
This is Andy. I'm sorry, Jeff.
go ahead, Andy.
I just looking at the landscape plan. I'm going through it, and it looks like there's a reference to an L202 and some details that I'm not seeing in the package. Is that sheet in here, or?
There's an I'm sorry. There we go. There's an L101 and an L102. Those should both be in there. The L102 gives all the materials.
Yeah, there's a grass detail, or there's some details that are referenced to an L202 that I'm kind of looking for. Okay.
I mean, you know, Lashford Johnson, they did the site next door to this one. They're very aware of what needs to be done in the area, and I'm sure they can work with anything you're coming up with there.
These two sheets are part of the TRC submittal, and that's why the detail sheet was included.
Herb, could you state your name for the record, please?
Herb Gillum with Johnson Lashover and Associates.
David, this is Erin Stevens speaking. Is it possible to zoom in a little bit on this? Just the screen I'm looking at, I can't really see the plant schedule. It'd be helpful. Thank you.
Let me know if you want to zoom in on that plan as well.
Yeah, if you could just shift it up so we can see the plan real quick, that'd be great. Thank you.
I think I need to zoom out just a little. Is that good?
Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Oh, maybe the page before this has one of the labels. Let me check. Oh, I think it's the same. No, this does have more.
I've got a couple of questions when we're ready.
Any other questions, Aaron, or is Jeff okay to go?
Yeah, that's fine. Jeff, go ahead.
Randall, you had mentioned that you were looking at flood elevation and the 2+ freeboard. I'm just kind of curious. I think I saw in here that there was a finished floor elevation marked up of 13. Is that correct? 13?
I think that.
Okay. And then the approximate grade, I'm looking at a grading plan here, is about 9 to 10. It looks like more like 10. Is that correct? And it looks like at the top of the drive, you're trying to get to 12-ish. Oh,
That's correct.
There we go.
That's good.
I mean,
Hey,
we went up
Herb.
like 2.9 feet and 115 feet over there at the driveway.
Right. I guess what I was getting, I appreciate y'all studying that, and it looks like you're getting closer to making it a little bit more sensitive, I guess, to what's happening. And I just wanted to get a feel for, when I'm looking at these perspective renderings, it shows everything kind of flat. It won't be quite that flat, but it's not quite as elevated as it was before. I think you're definitely on the right track there.
Good.
Good job, Herb. Question. I think the last time we were talking about this design, there was some windows and some toilets. And we had commented on glass in those more functional spaces. I think they were on the corners, if I'm looking right. I'm looking at my floor plan on my own screen. It seems like we've got windows still there. I'm just trying to understand what's happening in elevation and plan. It looks like you've got windows graphically shown with a wall behind it. And then on the elevation, you're showing what looks like windows. So can you kind of walk through that, Randall? What's happening? What your thoughts are there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it on this plan here on the upper left of the big box, a dialysis clinic. Yep. And then the same on the lower right. I think you can go to that lower right if you want to zoom in, David, and that will demonstrate what I'm talking about. Lower right.
Is that good?
Yeah, that little area on the lower right that's boxed out. There's a call out, plan detail call out that probably is related more to handicap clearances and all that stuff. But I'd love to hear the strategy there. It looks like there's a window with a wall behind it.
Yeah, I mean, they're both spandrel panels in both those locations. The patient handicap toilet in each location. I mean, if you look at the exterior elevations on this, I mean, in a way to keep this thing symmetrical and things to look, I think, better, it was better to infill that with window and spandrel panel. It'll look exactly the same from the outside, you know, and the function inside is what it is for those two rooms. They're the only two places where we've created a spandrel panel in a position to, you know, mostly to make sure the outside looked better, in my opinion.
Got it. And I think it would help us maybe to go through the elevations too and just kind of walk through this, the conceptual section So maybe in the next page or two, I think this is what Dinos was trying to get at. If you look at, like, zoom in on the top left, maybe where all those elevation marks are, David, that would be helpful. Yeah. Just trying to get an idea of where the top of truss might be. I presume this is going to be metal joists.
Yeah, it is 4 feet down from the 21.4.
Okay. So that 13'4" AFF is really just talking about those masonry openings that are
that's right
framing out those windows. Okay.
It is.
Okay. All right.
And on that front elevation there, all those windows are real windows that all serve that purpose. They're going to get a bunch of light in for our patients. If you go back out and look at these other elevations, down below the bottom one there, if you look at the left portion of the building that's taller with the two towers, we have the sign for the DCI. That's really an emergency exiting area from the treatment floor, and we need that. And then the other pair of windows in that other tower on the right portion of that, those would be spandrel panels in that location. Again, we looked at not doing that and just having a tower and infilling with the Nichiha panels or something, but thought this gave it a little bit better feel. And, you know, the other thing that happens, some of these buildings, I mean, these guys should be there 10 or 20 years, but if somebody else wants to come in there and turn that into an office building or something, you switch out the glass and it's a building that makes sense for them too. In the other elevation, the A4.1 should be the next sheet. There on the right end, again, we have essentially the same kind of higher end on the right end, and the pair of windows on the far right side, those two would be spandrel panel into that other patient toilet area. So no glass there as far as inside the space, just on the outside.
On this, I'm sure it's a graphical error, but I just want to make sure that on that upper right drawing, those notes that are leading to those three, what looks like doors and windows, the note says 6-inch metal downspout in bright and dark bronze.
That'd be wrong, wouldn't it? Yeah.
All right. So those are windows or doors, it looks like.
They're doors, yeah. Those the double doors are the entrance to our supply room. The right door is an entrance to this fire sprinkler riser room, and the left door is for bio-waste to be picked up after hours. That lower section in the back there, you see, that's all office area, primarily an entrance, conference room, and the break room for the employees.
Okay. Appreciate that.
We've got the roof. The roof is sloping to one side, over to the right side, I guess, in this one, but to the left as you're facing it from the front, and we'd be collecting those and taking those to the rear.
Randall, this is Dinos again. May I ask you, we had talked last time about inspirational aspects of what drove the design. Can you talk about that for a moment on this submittal?
Well, I mean, Dan, for me, it's a medical professional building, and these guys we do work for all over the country have a certain look they like, you know, and we've talked to them about some of the different buildings. You know, in this case, a brick building, and again, I would always say I like to have a bottom, a top, and a middle. And so we've done something to kind of, you know, rusticate and show a little bit of a difference at the bottom, even for all using one color, one white brick. You know, the middle, our shaft there, obviously we have some rhythm going on with the colonnades and stuff to kind of break that up. I didn't want to see one long wall anywhere. And then the tops, we've kept those simple and short because I think that's what y'all had asked for, you know.
Anything locally that may have influenced a design direction?
Not so much on this one. On the first one, I thought I saw a lot of stuff out there that was similar to what we were doing. But on this one, it seemed to be the direction y'all were pushing.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
This is Michelle. I had a question about the rooftop units. How many there were? I'm not seeing them on the roof plan, so I just want to understand how many there are. I know you stated they're 4 feet tall.
Yeah, there'll probably be about a dozen zones in this building. So that means anywhere from, you know, 10 to 12, 3 to 5 ton units up there. And, you know, again, we'll hold them down to where everything with the curb and all is under 4 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any additional questions? We do not have any public, members of the public signed up to speak. So with that, David, staff comments, please.
Okay. Before I start, I think I'm going to have to edit my staff comment number 1. I was commenting on the height of the parapet walls, although I was just kind of eyeballing what I thought was the height. I thought they were about 7 feet tall, but the applicant has said that they're only 4 feet tall, which perfectly hides the mechanical on the roof. But I'll go ahead and read the comment, which was staff feels that the design direction and the scale and the mass is more in keeping with the surrounding context. The parapet wall seems rather tall, I thought was 7 feet, making the space between the top of the windows to the top of the parapet wall a little awkward. Staff asked the applicant to study this and if it can be lowered a little, but I understand now that they probably can't. Number 2, staff likes the brick detailing, the brick color, and the Nijiha material used. In the comparison elevations, the brick below the windows appears to be a different color than the rest of the brick, but is not called out and appears to be the same brick in the perspectives, if the applicant could clarify. Number 4, in the notes on sheet A3.0, note number 3 calls out gutters and downspouts, but there's no number 3 on the roof plan diagram, if that could just be looked at and corrected. Number 5, at a glance, the signage looks fine, but that'll need to be submitted separately to DRB for review towards the end of the DRB process. With that, DRB does recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. Mr. Dover, is there anything that you want to clarify in staff comments?
No, I think those are all on target there. I think the parapet has been kept down, and then, like I said, we dropped the rear portion of the building even further to minimize the overall size and volume of the building.
Got it. Thank you. Board discussion and a motion.
David, can you go back to those comparative elevations one more time?
Yeah.
Between the previous submittal and.
We got this one as well.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to. I was probably one that made the comment about simplifying the elevations and along the lines of trying to be as indigenous and as contextual as you can possibly be within the area of this building site. I did comment that this was the elevations on the left were more complex, if not more illusionary, as opposed to really trying to get to the essence of the design. And I know that the architect before was indicating that he was inspired locally by this design. And then to hear that there was no local inspiration on the design to the right, yet this was the interpretation of what came from the board. I'm struggling with this a great deal. It's a very it's certainly the extreme, and I regret that there was no further endeavor to really pursue a more contextual aspect of what's going on in the area, because there's some really very, very nice structures in the area, from the ENT to even the Sharing Hope structure that's going up right now. And I think Jeff may have been the one that mentioned the doctor's office a little bit further up, closer to the Lowe's. I'm very familiar with this area. I understand the fundamental aspects of the design. I certainly understand the function that's driving the design. I'm just struggling with the ultimate evolution of how it's coming out.
You know, I'm not sure it's if we denied the previous application that you can really compare the two, because they're in theory supposed to be two different presentations, and to that end I think they are. Don't disagree with you. One is very complex and the other is very simple, and I kind of wonder if this one is a little too simple. There's some things that are interesting about it. The base is interesting, and the overall window proportions are okay, right? There's a couple things that kind of trouble me. I think the proportions of these tower things, if the tower things are even necessary, I think kind of editing those might be helpful. For instance, I guess if they're will it look a little odd that one side is wider than the adjoining side? Like, what are the purpose of the towers, number one? And if they are going to be the towers, should they not be? I appreciate the base, middle, top idea, which is a traditional building expression. And if these towers are going to, or if the building's going to be that traditional type of expression, then should the towers not be equally as traditional? Not saying it's necessarily appropriate for Henry Teklenberg. I agree with you. Henry Teklenberg has been a playground of very interesting buildings, of the ones that you mentioned, Dinos, and this one will probably not be on that interesting list. And it might benefit from pushing this design a little bit, but it's not of all the things that we reviewed on the board, it's not something that would not fit in the context of the city. Mm-hmm. Is it the best fit in the context of Henry Teklenberg? Maybe or maybe not. It's, like I said, it's certainly not the most playful. But it seems like, again, if you're going to take the idea of the traditional aesthetic with the base, middle, top, then I would say kind of run with it. And there's some things that are just kind of fundamentally weird to me, like the proportion of the towers, number one, and the windows and the toilet, number two. Like, if those are where the toilets need to be, the architecture needs to respond to the program that's happening within. And I don't think the tower, a celebration for those toilets, is the right solution. We kind of touched on that last time. It's either come up with a different massing, come up with a different floor plan, or downplay that corner instead of upplay it with this tower thing. And I think I would probably lean towards maybe simplifying the towers than adding another one on.
Yeah. I don't see a base. I see an inference to a base. I don't know if I see a middle and a top.
Right. Just
I see
base and top.
Yeah. I mean, and then again, the manner in which that application is, even on a multi-story building, or a mid-rise, small 3 or 4 story building, I can see its application. Here, I think that there's still I like what you were saying before. I'm struggling with the towers. I think it can be simplified even further. I find the change in materials is fine from what was presented prior to what is being presented today as far as a material palette. I'm okay with it. I just feel that there's just more massaging that really needs to occur to to really delineate architecturally how the building might fit.
You know, you mentioned the word editing or simplifying it, and it's like if we can't find a concept for the building to hang our hat on, and that drives the design, then the design ought to be simplified. It's either find a good, strong concept or simplify the building that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, it's bordering on a warehouse language with the large overstated windows and the bays that are, and I think that's where I'm struggling, is that there's one elevation is showing the strength of a bay concept, but it begins to become diluted as you go further down on the elevations toward the bottom of the page. And I think that's where the towers are beginning to interfere. There are too many, what do they mean? I guess that's where I'm struggling. Is it necessary to have the towers? I just feel that we're pushing so hard in this area for strong models as templates, and I think the building just wants to know what it's going to be. So anyway, Michelle probably has a lot more comments too, and Jeff, you too. I've probably spoken enough.
I have a few. I mean, I agree, Dinos and Jeff, with what you both have stated so far. I think that it's important that this building hold its own in this district, because of the level of architecture that we've reviewed in this area and that has been built. I mean, that's the site context. That's part of the design challenge. And so that's one overall comment. And to kind of get into the weeds a little bit, I agree about these towers. I mean, I think that, especially in the east elevation, the tower has this cap, yet it doesn't have a cap in the left side of the elevation, but maybe those aren't really towers, so they don't need the cap, but then it's so close to the bay spacing. There are just some very confusing, clumsy moves, I think, that work against an overall holistic design here. I do appreciate the recesses of the bays, that push and pull of light and shadow. I think that that's successful, but that proportion of the towers, that middle is quite troubling, and I think it just works against the design. And if you don't have an overall concept, then you're kind of swimming against the tide here again. So I mean, I think that there's some potential with a limited amount of what is successful that we're seeing here. But I mean, I encourage the applicant to, really, really dig deep into these comments and to apply some inspiration, to this design. That's the challenge ahead of you, I'm afraid.
I think too, to speak, and I'm going out of my realm, but looking at the previous motion, the comments were the design to be more responsive to the context of the site as it relates to its neighbors and context. Be honest and vertical expression, look to the surrounding buildings for a material palette that might provide inspiration. So, I mean, the message I think that y'all are conveying was there. With the previous motion.
Yeah, and thanks, Erica. And that's what I'm missing right now, from my standpoint. And I don't disagree. There are some elements here on a facadal basis that have an opportunity, but I feel that as it turns its corner, it's begins to lose those. How's the landscaping looking?
Aaron or Andy, any comments?
Wait, oh, I was hoping to respond.
Yeah.
Well, at the end.
David, can you go to the landscape
Oh, I'm sorry.
portion? Thank
This is Andy and Aaron. You want to go, Aaron, or
You go for it.
well, and I guess from my point of view, the landscape is kind of what we're saying about the building is that it's a landscape plan that probably meets TRC's requirement, but I really don't feel like it engages the site very well.
Goddamn.
And I mean, kind of some of the, just this kind of straight foundational planning along the front and just a kind of a random sod bed up there. That planting can engage that whole curve and kind of take up, that whole frontage. As I said, there are some references to an L202. It references a seed mix. I'd like to see what that seed mix is for the pond. This kind of the table kind of says seed and references hybrid Bermuda, which I really wouldn't want to see in the pond area. I just think that, from my point of view, the landscape plan needs to evolve with the building and engage the building.
Aaron, any additional feedback?
No, I think Andy covered it well.
Can I respond to any of that?
Really, at this point, it's just in board discussion, unless any members of the board has a question.
Okay.
But if there's any inaccurate information, Mr. Dover, you're welcome to respond to that, but not, it's not meant to go into a dialogue, but if there's something that's being stated that's inaccurate.
Well, yeah, I think there's some misunderstanding. I think these guys are architects. They ought to know those straight on elevations. There's a lot of bumps and ins and outs in those things besides just the recesses for the windows. That west design, there's like a 20-foot setback from that first section with the towers to the next one to the next one. I mean, these things, this isn't one long flat wall. It isn't a warehouse. We were trying to set apart the front gigantic bay that is our patient treatment area. The plan and elevations reflect that, I think, honestly, straight up. And we tried to simplify it because last time we were told, all these other pitched roofs and all were somehow too complicated or too much. And I'm looking at the building next door and how simple that is. And if you go to the A4.2 and show that, I'm not sure how this is a warehouse and that's not. I just don't get it.
Okay, thank you. Any other board discussion or motion?
First of all, I do believe that we only thing we can do is look at what we've been given, and we do understand the drawings, and we do understand the architecture, at least from the standpoint of what we're trying to look at. And we're trying to look at it collectively, and I'm actually leading up to something here. I think that the real issue is, Erica, is getting back to the comments that you read a few moments ago that dealt with the contextual relationship to the area, to the area. There are multiple buildings and a new one going up that's equally an excellent example of thoughtful very contemporary architecture. And I understand, and I don't disagree with what Jeff had said, that every building doesn't have to be the face of the property. Some of it can be actually canvas to everything going on around there. But if it will be canvas, then it needs to take on a different approach as opposed to what we're dealing with here. I think that where I'm struggling, and of what I think I heard other members of the board struggling with, is that it's somewhere in between right now. It's not delineating itself appropriately in a manner that we can fully understand exactly what the design intent is. It does disturb me to hear that basically the design, the context was no longer important, or let me rephrase that. If I heard it correctly, that context was overridden by corporate branding and identity. And I do know that from my years on this board that it runs in conflict with what we're trying to do as far as the design process is concerned. Can you read those comments one more time, Erica?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't have those in front of me.
I'll read the whole thing if that's easiest, just so that we're all clear. It was a denial with the design to be more responsive to the context of the site as it relates to its neighbors and context as it relates to the surrounding vegetation. Emphasize aspects of the building's internal spaces, specifically the treatment area. Simplify the design, be honest in vertical expression, and look to the surrounding buildings for a material palette that might provide inspiration. Move towards a design that will lighten the building visually. Landscape to reflect the architectural direction, use mostly native plants. Be mindful that the conceptual design document should reflect a minimum 20% design completion. That was a unanimous motion and vote.
Thank you. One of the observations of this building, just the way it's sited, it's very close to the curb relative to the building next door. If you, that image that's shown on the screen now, that the senior or memory care unit is set so far back from the street, and this one is going to be right on the street. For it to be a canvas building, it sure has some pretty good prominence. There's no comment there. It's just an observation.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
If I were using that as a design cue, I would place some priority on what this looks like and holds context to. It'd be one thing if this were 60, 80 feet off the curb and planted. So prominent.
Again, can I speak? We're saving a bunch of big trees by placing the building where we did.
Mr. Digber, if we have any questions, we'll let you know. Okay. But the only option to speak right now is if we're talking about something that's inaccurate in our statements.
I don't think there's.
Thank you. I know it's a little bit difficult virtually, so thank you.
It's not a siding problem. I think it's there's a responsibility to the architecture to be more present.
I'm struggling with it. Okay, and I may be a lone wolf here in this regard, but I'm trying to see within the context of the resubmittal where the applicant has responded to the comments before. And the comments were, I mean, the expression of
I think they've simplified.
Yeah, they simplified. But again, looking material palette, contextual aspects with the surrounding buildings that are going up. I'm really just struggling with it. if a deferral will mean with comments that that the design direction is an appropriate direction, and I think that we're misleading because we're going to be struggling throughout the process if we ask for a deferral and then we come back with just minor minimal impact. I don't see the response to the comments of the denial the last time at this point in time, other than what could possibly be interpreted as a simplification. But I just feel that there's so much context in this area that's available that it was, I don't want to say it was ignored, but maybe it was just overly minimized, if not overly simplified. Does anyone feel any stronger about deferral? Or
I think fundamentally that the comments from last time still apply.
Mhm. I would agree.
This is Kristen Kraus. Just wanted to say that my opinion is that it looks very commercial and has a simplified curb appeal, for lack of maybe a better word, and that I agree with Dinos and Jeff as well. That area has so many incredible architectural design, especially the Sharing Hope, that's new construction that's still underway, but maybe that corner has more of a opportunity at the sacrifice of maybe a tree in the rear. I don't know. Those are my
If it's I will say if it's a grand tree, you know, we don't have the authority to remove them, just for the record.
Oh.
Well, and I do believe that this has the potential, and with the comments that were noted before, this is not intended in any other manner other than to help to be instructive, but I don't see the responsiveness to those comments before, and consequently I will, just to get a motion on the floor, I would have to move for denial again with the formally stated comments as still being applicable.
Okay, so we have a motion for denial with the exact, with the same comments as previously read. I'm not going to reread those. I've read them almost twice now. Is there a second?
Second.
Dinos has the motion. Michelle has the second. I'll now call roll. Kristen.
yes in favor.
Aaron.
Yes, in favor.
Jeff.
Yes, in favor.
Andy.
Yes, in favor.
And yes in favor for me as well. All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda. 1325 Folly Road, requesting conceptual approval of a new car wash. Looks like,
Okay, so we did see the context of the location and so forth last time. So I will turn it over to the applicant. First speaker is Denny Gapins.
Yep, and then also he was going to join by phone, but he's actually joined by computer, our civil engineer, Thomas Durante. So if we could unmute him as well, just in case he can be of of
Sure.
assistance.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. My name is Denny Gappins, and I'm with Progressive AE representing AAA on this car wash. We are requesting conceptual approval as noted. Before we start with the architecture, I'd like to begin with some recap on the site and landscape changes since our last meeting. David, could you
Sure.
switch us over to sheet C1A, the site plan?
The current one?
Correct. Yep. Thank you. So we had received a few comments on the site plan at the last meeting, one of which was to push the sidewalk further into the site and get it off of Folly Road. Also a suggestion to add some curvature to it. And so we've addressed both of those by incorporating them into the civil plan. We've reinforced the curvature of the sidewalk as well with the 4-foot high screening wall that's immediately behind it. Since last time we met, there's also been the addition of the new Carta bus stop, which you can see in the northeastern corner of the site. And then located directly behind that, we've relocated a small space for respite along that multi-use path and actually moved it behind the 4-foot screening wall to help buffer it from the Folly Road traffic and create that space for respite. Can you go to C1C, please? Should do next. We've been receiving a lot of comments from both the board and staff through the process thus far about trying to rotate the building parallel with Folly. This was just a simple exhibit to show that we did investigate that a while ago, and based off the minimum length of a functioning building along with the necessary approach and egress from the building, we're unable to make that happen at the site. Sheet L1, please. The next one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Shoot. Apologize.
There we go. The only comment we had regarding the landscape plan at the last hearing was to substitute the miscanthus for something different. So we have done that. And then the only other changes to this plan, we're really updating it to reflect the new civil site plan layout. Okay, and then can you go to the architectural floor plan, please, David? Yep, there you go. So as we switch gears into the architectural portion of the presentation, I wanted to recap a few of our notes of what we heard you tell us at the last meeting. You requested that we investigate flipping our previous floor plan to potentially get more glass on the Folly Road side. You wanted us to rethink the Folly elevation in its entirety. You felt this was an opportunity to really make this an interesting structure. And given the scale, the opportunity for it to become a jewel box of such or something special. You also wanted the architecture to really represent a sense of function and its use. You felt that it was too serious with all the masonry, and ultimately felt the design should be more expressive of its use and function, more playful and more fun. So the architecture that I'm about to show you guys is a vast departure from what our previous scheme was, as we were very deliberate and conscious in addressing all of those comments with this new concept. So beginning with the plan, we were able to flip that program space, which actually resulted in an abundance of storefront to the east, to that northeast corner of the building that you see. That addressed the Folly Road concerns, also activates that facade. And ultimately became a better space for the employees that are going to be using that space. We've also shifted these two program bars a bit more, just to allow for some better resolutions in the massing, which we'll get to at the elevations later. Other than that, the plan largely remained the same. The wash tunnel remained the same. Okay, David, can you, let's go one more slide. Thank you. So what we're looking at with this perspective is an updated view of the building with this concept. If we're looking at the southern and eastern facades, the massing is really supposed to be expressive of the program, and also established a hierarchy between the two program bars, which we'll see a little bit better in the next view. The south facade, which is the prominent one in this view, is fronting the adjacent large parking lot in front of the adjacent grocery store shopping center.
Right.
And what we've done is utilized a profiled metal wall panel system to create texture, and really viewed this whole elevation as a canvas for the sun and for shadow play. So you start to get that play with the repetitive pattern. And what we've done is take that repetitive pattern and actually shift it slightly at each of those layers. So we get a visual movement along the entire elevation and really activate it. The angles of the massing speak to the vehicular passage through the tunnel, even with the parapet rising at the delivery end of the tunnel, delivering new clean cars. And then actually folds over and becomes a large canopy feature that which begins to shade the northeast corner and cover the entrance for the employees into that break area. At the top between the canopy and the building, we've enclosed it with a glass box to add more visual interest without the heavy weight of an opaque material, and the idea that it begins to form a presence not only during the day but in the evenings by being internally lit. Next slide, please. So again, in this rendering, we're at the east and northern facades. You can start to see how the massing is really starting to use or starting to express the different program spaces. Metal cladding for the vehicular tunnel, and then switching gears to a softer, warmer composite wood product for the pedestrian scale and pedestrian side of the building, which is what we're cladding the equipment in those employee areas with. Canopy, as you can see here, begins to cover that entrance for the employees and address the Folly Road elevation, coming in with something more dynamic and playful. And then moving down in elevation, you can see that incorporation of the additional glazing that we get on this facade, which I think activates the elevation much better and is much more friendly to those passing by than our previous metal, which had the equipment doors on that front elevation. And then we can switch to the elevations. So next slide. So on this east elevation facing Folly Road, you can see we've reduced the masonry down to a base reveal. So keeping an aspect of the masonry, but reducing it in scope so that it becomes something a little bit more special, and also keeps the other materials off the ground just a bit. We're utilizing the composite wood in two different colors, the gray vertical and then the warmer Ipe colored horizontal. And of course the sides of the towers that flank that car wash exit are the metal panels. Next slide, please. So on the south elevation, again, the idea that it's a canvas for the sun, you start to get this visual movement caused by the shadowing that's going to occur throughout the day. The gestural angles indicative of the vehicle movement, as well as the way that we've articulated the fenestration widths and spacing, again, to incite movement across this elevation. And then something present in all schemes and all elevations is that we've taken the jambs and headers of any fenestration or openings, or in this case, this wooden inset, and flanked them with a thin piece of aluminum trim that starts to incorporate a bit of that green color. So you get a little punch and a little playfulness with that while still adding to the detail of the building. It should be noted on this elevation, due to our proximity to the adjacent property line, we are limited to under 10% transparency there. So what you're seeing is maximizing that amount. But in order to create a bigger impact, we've created that recess with the wood paneling, or rain screen system, I should say. Next slide, please. This is on the west elevation. This is the car wash entry. At the pre-wash canopy, which is part of their program, which is rendered as a horizontal flat canopy with the green columns. It incorporates the same materiality as the larger program piece. You can start to see the dominant structure versus the shorter pedestrian scale equipment bay with the materiality. And again, treating the masonry in kind of a delicate manner where it's gently revealed around key features. And one more slide. Then moving around to the north elevation facing the vacuums and parking, again, the warmer, softer material cladding this more pedestrian scale building portion. The addition of the storefront glazing at the Folly Road side. And then the addition of clear story windows into the equipment room, which will allow for natural light during the day, and then emit a glow in the evenings without showing the equipment that's housed within. The metal parapets beyond, which are actually screening 2 RTU units for us. And then the swooping canopy in the foreground there to the left with 2 pairs of columns. And what's not shown is that we do have landscape along the base of the building, which will further kind of help soften that elevation up for the pedestrians and users. And then one more slide, David. And then a material board indicating some of those materials discussed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Very much. Any questions?
This is Erin. I have a quick question, and apologize if I miss it, but this is a perfect one to stop on. So that wall, I noticed in the plan, it was just called out as a masonry wall. What is the proposed finish on that?
This would be an integral colored CMU unit with a precast cap.
Okay.
And it'd be the same that we're using for the construction of our building walls that is revealed at the base. So they would match.
And then the dumpster enclosure, what was that material for that?
It's the composite wood rain screen system. So both the dumpster enclosure and the equipment enclosure will match that smaller equipment box.
Okay, great, thank you.
I had one question as well. Will there be any additional canopies over the vacuum station similar to the one in Savannah Highway?
There will not.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I have a couple questions. This is Michelle. Denny, thank you for your presentation. First question is, what is your roof drainage strategy for the building? I'm not seeing a roof plan, but I just want to understand how you're draining water from the roof.
Yep. In the past, we've utilized internal roof drains and downspouts.
Okay, so you anticipate using an internal system here as well?
Yes.
Okay, and then my second question has to do with the south elevation. David, if you don't mind pulling that up, please. So, you know, I understand the limited amount of fenestration on this elevation, but I did want to understand what the green panel is that I'm seeing in the storefront system, if I'm understanding the drawing correctly. Is that just a different color glass, or is it like a metal panel, or I was just curious about the material there.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry for not highlighting that. But present on a few of these select storefront windows on this elevation, as well as a few of the storefront panes around the break room area, we've incorporated a clear vinyl graphic that would be applied to the interior face. Again, just to carry that pop of color through not only the jamb and header trim, but also through some of the fenestration.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Dinos, Jeff? Dinos?
No, I have, I will save my comments for the
Okay.
board.
With that, David, staff recommendations, please.
Okay, this is David. Staff much prefers this design direction compared to the last submittal. This design is interesting and is more thoughtful to its presentation to Folly Road. Staff can accept the fact that it's not possible to rotate the building to have the long side face Folly Road, given the width of the site. Staff likes the material choices for this design. Staff comment number 4, referring to the south elevation, the staff feels this facade is a little overpowering and tall, and wondering if a break could be introduced at the top, allowing glazing to wrap around the south facade. I actually, so this is what I was envisioning, just to give a break here and wrap some of this glass around to this side of the facade. Regarding the overall height of the building, I did have a question I should have asked earlier. Is it possible to lower the inside ceiling height by a little bit, a foot or 2 or 3? Or is it required to be where it is based on the equipment being used inside? If it can be lowered, staff asks that the overall height be lowered a few feet, including the top of the parapet walls and the tallest point of the roof. Number 6, staff likes the reconfigured bike path and landscape plan along Folly Road and the curving wall that helps to screen the asphalt drives from Folly. Number 7, staff would like to see the screen wall follow the drive into the tunnel and curve around to the south elevation and terminating at or near the corner of the building. So that's referring to right here. I was wondering if this could wrap around. So you're also screening this portion of the drive. And I've just shown that in plan view here. So currently the wall comes like this in here, and I'm just asking if it could possibly curve this way and terminate near the corner of the building to screen this area as well. The landscape plan does not include this screen wall and should. Please show the wall at an accurate scale with the double line for thickness. Number 9, it appears that the site and landscape plans do not show the current building footprint, but should. Number 10, the applicant has placed willow oaks in the tree islands to the east. Let me go to the landscape plan. So the applicant has placed willow oaks in the tree islands to the east of where the row of overhead vacuums are located, which is good because it will help to screen the vacuums. I was referring to these here, which will screen the vacuums, which is good. Number 11, I labeled the clear green vinyl film on the south elevation as you did on the east elevation. Number 12, landscape plan is looking good. Double check the plant labels and counts. For example, I'm seeing some American Beauty shrubs, which are labeled, called out as CALA. They're not labeled on the plan and not matching the plant list count. So just if you could double check those. Number 13, staff asked the applicant to provide some pervious pavers on the site since they are providing more parking than zoning requires, 15 spaces over. So possibly study adding pervious pavers to all the vacuum spaces. Number 14, please provide a detailed preliminary review for all traffic signs to have a decorative wood or metal post and not the U-channel metal post. Number 15, the equipment enclosure and trash enclosure are matching the building materials well. With that, staff does recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. Board discussion and a motion. Denny, I assume, did you have anything that, any clarifications on anything that David stated that was inaccurate?
Yes, we did look at doing the glazing on that southern facade up at the tower as David had suggested, but as mentioned during the presentation, due to the percentage of fenestration allowable, we're unable to do that. And with regards to his question about height being lowered, we're not able to to lower that due to the internal equipment.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question too?
Sure.
That you raised? And this is Erin, by the way. So since the that wall didn't show up in the planting plan, looking at it here, it looks like it's hard to tell what's. Oh, wait, go back to where you were. That was perfect.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Just trying to figure out if there's potential to plant anything between the sidewalk and the wall, or is it pushed right up against? It's kind of hard to tell in this perspective, and since it didn't show up in the planning plan, it was hard to tell. But curious if it's proposed to be right up against the sidewalk, or if there's some planting area.
They were showing a little bit here, but you're right, it's not on the plan.
Yeah. Does the
Aaron, it is kind of very vaguely on the plan, and there does look like there's a little bit of planting between it. It looks like they have some iris. I'm trying to
okay.
Navigate, but it looks like there's a little bit of space there.
Okay.
Aaron, do you feel that and Andy, do y'all feel that the planting would soften that wall some, or are you thinking of something growing on the wall, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, the reason I asked the question is just because if we're using that wall, to screen some of the parking and as David suggested, wrap around so that you're screening on multiple sides, I think it might be nice, to have something to soften it in front instead of just having the monolithic wall for the whole property frontage. But it seems like it probably can be done. I don't know if we can flip back to the landscape plan. I don't have another screen in front of me, so I can't flip through myself. I'm sorry, but
no, I mean, I think it would help. I mean, I'm looking at the bank next, or trying to look at the bank next door and how it was handled. I mean, are we in board discussion, or are we kind of hijacked the meeting? Okay.
No, board discussion, you're good.
I guess, I do applaud the form of the wall.
Yeah.
I think it is the evolution and step, I think, is exactly what I was thinking about. I'm kind of, thinking about, like I said, the bank next door. We have a kind of a brick wall next door, and then we kind of abruptly changed into this masonry. And I know it matches the building, but I'm wondering if adding the planting, or a little bit more planting, wouldn't help with that transition also.
Mm-hmm. I think
between
it would
materials.
also. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
No, I was just saying that it may help with that transition with materials and kind of soften the presentation of the wall.
And I think it would make the experience of the pedestrian multi-use path, sidewalk, whatever we're calling it, a little more pleasant if it was softened by that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, I think it's heading in the right direction. I think this is conceptual, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's something to study at the next level. I think I agree. I like the way, like I said, the way it's going. I like the multi-use path, and how it's evolving. So
I've got one question, and I like the way the path is meandering too, but you bring up the question about what's it doing on adjoining properties, and property to the north, the way that the bus stop and this roundabout thing and the wide pathway, it looks like it's butting into a site wall that's in place. And if I were to follow this path, I would be on the lot interior side. I think this is a good, maybe the next one of the civil plans will show this. I think it's a neat idea. I just don't think it's really thought through about how the community will use this pathway.
Yeah, and you know, some of that is,
That's
I
a great
think,
one right there, David. If you zoom in to the north property boundary. Sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
no, that's fine.
Just to kind of zoom into this area, you'll see the site wall that's kind of dashed in there. And if I were to follow this path, I'd feel like I needed to go into the parking lot. And should it be on the Folly road side of it or the other side? So I think it's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's being designed to the context right now.
A little bit more thought. Is this part of Rethink Folly Road?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just
the path is required.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that. Wait, let me. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it is the same. I was thinking the path is different.
So we study the path.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into that whole, I guess, where I was going with that, Jeff, is that these are great movements and great concepts. I think just at the next level, you need to kind of cross your T's and dot your I's,
Make
sure everything's coordinated with what's going to happen in the future. I guess is because the piece next door doesn't have the path and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if this is Dinos, if I could add, I would really like to commend Denny and Progressive AE for responding, which I think so wonderfully, to the comments before. Can you go to the south elevation for a moment, David? One of the things that I feel that a lot of times architecturally you're so afraid to do is create almost a monolithic or even a monographic facade. And this is, I like this. This is very bold. It's responsive to its proximity to the adjoining property line. I think that there are enough references here architecturally that show a tie-in, and the fact that it is bold, it's thought-provoking from maybe what you will see from buildings in the future. I really believe that from my perspective, from the last presentation, what you can see up above, that it's a very thought-provoking structure. I really like the overall form personally. I'm anxious to see the evolution into the preliminary designs. I do believe that you are consistent in the form, because Savannah Highway does have the arched or the curved roof line. This one does have, again, another branding reference to what's happening there. I do thank the applicant too for restudying that Folly Road elevation and changing the functional aspects internally and creating more of a front door appearance as far as the building is concerned. And if you could go to that, I guess it's the east elevation. Yeah. Well, that perspective works. That's fine. There's a really interesting layering aspect that's going on that is really enjoyable. The facade coming up the south vertically and then forming back on the roof is just a really nice treatment. And then the break between that north wall and the clear story, which peeks through, and then of course the angular columns. I think this is very, very nice and very thoughtful in its presentation.
I couldn't agree more with Dinos, and I feel this is Kristen, and it sets a new standard for Folly Beach, for sure. Folly Beach Road, love it. I think all the colors and window separations with color in behind and the green and the gray. It's a nice look.
I think it agreed with what everyone's saying, and to not have the building oriented along Folly Road, I think a design of this merit certainly warrants, not doing that. I think it was very well done and responded to our comments well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really do like the movement or the evolution of the building from what we saw before to where we are now. I think I can agree with that. I guess my only other landscape comment is we kind of have this hedge that runs around the property. And I was just kind of in the next evolution of the landscape plan, if we could maybe get some articulation to this kind of straight line that runs around the property rather than, just this kind of hard row of plants. If we can kind of work that into some movement into that, I think it would help.
I'd be delighted. Jeff, did you have any comments? Or?
I do not have any comments. Oh, this is.
Would, if y'all wouldn't mind, I'd be delighted to entertain a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And if I can just interject before I go on for a moment, and 13 I know is something that we have been trying to institute as well. And David, I'm glad you caught that, as far as anything over the zoning would be pervious material or even soft parking. Thank you. And then board comments is to restudy the path along Folly Road to ensure that's integral relationship with neighboring properties. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then restudy the hedge along the perimeter of the property to introduce articulation as opposed to a hard row of plantings.
Say that again, Dina. Sorry. Restudy the hedge.
Restudy hedge to introduce articulation.
A perimeter hedge.
A perimeter hedge, yes. As opposed to the hard row of plantings. From an architectural standpoint, at preliminary, study roof penetrations to consolidate penetrations to the greatest extent possible. Michelle, Jeff, am I leaving anything out on the architectural side?
So we have a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments 8, 9, and 11 through 14, along with board comments. 1, restudy the path along Folly Road to ensure appropriate relationship with adjoining properties. 2, restudy the perimeter hedge to introduce articulation instead of a hard row of plantings. And 3, at the preliminary submittal, study the roof penetrations to consolidate as much as possible.
Can I don't know the protocol, I might have to amend it, but I did
Sure.
want to add a comment about studying the placing plantings between the wall and the sidewalk to help soften that.
Thank you. Yes.
And then I'm not opposed to including staff comment 7 as well, but I can't speak for everyone there, so.
Maybe to study that, Dinos, would that be
Yeah,
okay?
That
Okay.
would be fine. Sure.
And then is Aaron's comment number 4 okay to add to the motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've amended the motion to include staff comment 7 and to study extending the wall as staff stated. And number 4, to board comments, to place plantings between the sidewalk and the wall along Folly Road.
Sounds perfect.
Is there a
Can I-
second?
Can I, just.
This is Andy. I'll second.
Thanks, Andy. What was that, David?
I was just wondering if you want to, for Aaron's comment, not only, they are showing plantings, but did you want to increase the space between the wall and the sidewalk for more planting?
I would say just to study it unless Aaron disagrees.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion by Dinos, a second by Andy. I'll call roll now. Kristen?
Yes, in favor.
Aaron?
Yes, in favor.
Al?
Yes, in favor.
Jeff?
Yes, in favor.
I'm also yes in favor. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dinos, I know you're thinking if that could have only been number 2.
I was going to say the same. It's like, why couldn't they have done what they did?
That was a very, very
I was
nice
thinking that
response to
too.
the comments. Yeah. Very nice response to the comments from the board last time.
Agreed. All right, I think I'm out. So y'all have a good night.
And I guess I'm out too.
Bye, guys. Good to see you.
It's always a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys. Hope to see you in person soon.
Amen.
Jeff, are you up?
I am. Yeah, great. So here we go with agenda item number 4, 1400 Old Town Road. This is a project I think we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So we can move right over to the applicant.
Yes, I don't have any context slides. If we could turn it over to Jenny Horn, please.
Super.
Hi, good afternoon, or I should say good evening. And we are representing Charleston County Parks and Recreation Commission tonight.
Oh, Jenny, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, great, hold on. Are you able to hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
We will need more time than the 10 minutes. That is typical. It's a large submittal and don't know how much more time we can request. Wanted to throw that out.
Okay. You're the last application. I think we can take as much time as you need. 15 minutes. Is that okay? Better?
We'll try for it. With my Georgia drawl, I'll try and make it go fast. All right, so if we could go to the next slide. Basically, our next slide represents our agenda and how we're going to organize our talking points tonight. And go to the next slide, please. I think, Jeff, you mentioned this earlier. Everyone has seen this image before, but there's a little bit of history to the site. Mrs. Emily Farrow left her land, her family home, to the care of the Low Country Land Trust and CCPRC in perpetuity for preservation and the use for public to enjoy it for years to come. So some of the history, in particular, Mrs. Farrow enjoyed equestrian activity. She had a riding academy. Her family once did truck farming on the property. And then also, her mother had a hand with propagating camellias and azaleas on the property throughout her early childhood. So there's a lot of family history and just landscape history too that surrounds this piece of property. Next slide, please. So for context, Old Town Road borders the property. To the north of our property is Charlestown Landing, historic site. And to the south of our property, we have the West Pawnee Plantation neighborhood. And then other adjoining or adjacent neighborhoods, Lenovar, Charlestown Estates to the north. But our property itself is has two different parcels. We have the unrestricted park property, which is about 13 acres with no restrictions on it through the covenants and restrictions. And then we have the 54 acres, which do have a historic conservation easement overlay onto the property, and which governs our design as well. Next slide. This is our master plan. You see the historic gates, which is the historic brick entry and the historic alley that exists today that will be protected through this master plan and the development of the site. We also have added a main entry to the park itself, which will be the main vehicular entrance. And that entrance will take all visitors either to the events pavilion, that's just off to the left of the main entry, or directly to the Rain Hut and Learning Center, which is the main hub activity center for the park itself. It's where visitors will check in, get a little bit of history on the park before they go on their adventure. Also, it's important to note that the site itself has several existing buildings. The Rain Hut in particular is an existing building on the property. Stables 1, which is with the maintenance hub, is an existing structure. We have the main house, which is just to the east of the, yep, right there. And that will house CCPR staff, employees for the park. We also have Stables 2, that is existing. We have the dock, which has access to Old Town Creek. And then we also have the caretaker's house, which is, yep, right there. And the other areas within the park, the lines that you see are the existing horse trails, or portions of the existing horse trails that exist that we are retaining and keeping for our 1 mile trail pedestrian loop. Next slide. So the next two slides recap where we have been with our conceptual comments and our preliminary. Everything that's grayed out pertains to the building submittals that you have seen, or that you recently saw in June, I should say, and part of our submittal back a year ago, or a little over a year ago. But basically, from our conceptual comments that we received, the main takeaways from that was that the board wanted to see more development on the pedestrian entry, a wayfinding system for the park itself, and then the evolution of the landscape plan and how the landscape and the buildings work in conjunction with one another. Next slide. So in June, you saw the building come through for preliminary review, and the majority of these comments were addressed with the building or pertain to the building submittals themselves. The items identified in red are some of the updates that you will see with this submittal tonight. Next slide. So the overall site plan, again, we have this goes back to the agenda. We parceled this off, so to speak, to be able to walk through it with A being the events pavilion and main entries, B, the Rain Hut and Learning Center areas. C and D will be presented together, main house and the maintenance hub, and then E and F areas will be presented together as well. Next slide. Some images for that are throughout the property. The top left image is the historic alley looking back toward Old Town Road, so your interior to the property. The dock and overview, or the bluff overview at the caretaker's house. And then some images taken from the dock looking out onto Old Town Creek. Next image. Next, please. So starting with the events pavilion, again, these are additional images that you would see from the perspective of either being on the horse trail at the events pavilion looking out toward Old Town Creek. But it gives you an idea of the views that are available and the feel and look of the site itself. Next slide, please. This is our demo plan. I should add that along Old Town Road, there is an existing 4-foot wide sidewalk that we will be improving along the limits of the property from 4 feet to 10 feet wide. And so that's part of this demo plan, I should add. And then this also just shows some of the trees that we're having to evaluate for removal. Next page. Or next slide. Again, the southern limits of the demo plan that shows the pedestrian entry area. And you can kind of really see the sidewalk there in the hatch now. Next slide. So our site plan, this is the northern portion of the site plan. It shows our sidewalk, the 10-foot multi-use path, the area or the limits of our 4-rail wooden fence, our main entry, our entrance into the property, how our parking circulation works with the entry of the events pavilion. As a person we do have a drop-off, a pedestrian drop-off at the front of the building, and then we also have a caretaker's drop-off kind of closer to the dumpster enclosure. We're providing approximately 63 spaces. And if you go to the next slide. Again, just a general site plan of the southern portion of the main entry area, showing our pedestrian entry, how the 10-foot multi-use path interacts with the pedestrian entry. And then also some of the overflow parking that we have in that area where David is showing the hand. Next. Next slide, please. Sorry. It's an enlargement of the events pavilion, and I believe y'all probably saw this last go around as well. All materials in here, for the most part, will be room finished concrete, except at the 2 areas that are called out as salt finish concrete that relate more to the events area in the separated room.
Jenny, if you could keep your voice up a little. I'm still having trouble sometimes hearing you.
Oh, okay, will do. And go to next slide. Again, some details of some of our low walls that we're looking at the events pavilion courtyard, the segmental retaining wall that's going to be close to the dumpster, how we're addressing some of the rain chain drainage from the events pavilion into the landscape, in our details for the vehicular gates that lead into those overflow areas. Next slide. our dumpster detailing for the events pavilion. The brick columns will reflect the brick or match the brick that we're using at the events pavilion, with siding for the areas in between those columns. Next slide, please. Our landscape plan, the intent with our landscape plan is to utilize as many native species as we can, complemented by some non-natives where we think it's appropriate. But this slide shows, gives you an idea from a common name standpoint what that consideration is. Next slide, please. This is our planting plan. This is also illustrates our ecological mix that we are looking to use mainly in the front portions of the events pavilion and where we have connections with the rain chain and how we're going to show that through the landscape. So we're looking to use, you know, the black-eyed Susans with the oak leaf hydrangeas. We have some bald cypress in there with pine, purple coneflower, and so forth. Milkweed for habitat. Continue to the next slide. Our pedestrian entry, the top right image is what we presented at the conceptual submittal. The other two images are where we are to date with our design. So the pedestrian entry, you can see in the illustration where we have the existing historic wall and gate area. That will, of course, remain. What we would like to do is supplement in front of those gates and wall system a seating area for pedestrians, drinking fountain, really create an entry sequence for the pedestrian, biker, walker coming into the park at this entry. Next slide, please. Again, this is the landscape at this entry, looking to use and complement some of the azaleas that exist on site. So we have our palette is azaleas, and we have some muley grass with or pedlum as a backdrop to the muley grass. Next slide. This is our vehicular entry sequence. What we submitted prior is on the left side of the page. Our new entry to the right, we do have a deceleration lane that we have within the project for right turns into the park. We have full access going out of the park. Median, where we will have our main entry sign in the center of the median. And then also you can see the location of the electronic gates and brick columns and walls to assist the park with closures and their hours of operation.
If I can interrupt you, Jenny, that was 15 minutes. So if you can continue on.
Okay, will do. I'll go faster.
If it helps, you can just address the comments. It was previous from just address previous comments.
Oh, okay. Go to next slide. Well, this is one of the previous comments with the entry features and the wayfinding signage. So you can see our main entry sign to the top left. And then we've worked out the more details of the main entry gates and shown the electronic gates. Continue to next slide. Again, just some more detailing of our wood fence and main entry sign. Next slide. Planting plan. Again, using the natives, ecological mix and some of the azaleas and camellias. Next slide. Wayfinding was one of the comments in the original submittal. This illustrates that system that we're looking at. We are looking at pressure treated southern yellow pine, grade A, for the post and the post for these signs, a metal panel. Mainly, we want something easy that CCPRC can also manage over time if they need to replace or add signage on the property. But we also have an interpretive element too, which the owner has the option to be able to do those 3 different signs where they think it's most applicable. Next slide. Our wayfinding system location map. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So some images of the Rain Hut Learning Center area. The Rain Hut is the existing image to our left. Existing live oaks that are in that area of the park. Next slide. Just one, there we go. This is our conceptual rendering for the Rain Hut Learning Center area. So you'll see rain gardens kind of at the entry between the 2 building masses, and then a play area and overlook in the background. Next slide. Demo plan. Next slide, there we go. So this is our site plan, and you can begin to see the entry sequence and how the pedestrian would navigate between the Rain Hut and the Learning Center. The idea with the circle in between the 2 is that we would have an inlay of a historical map of Old Town Creek in that circular area. Rain gardens to the left, in front, and to the right of that whole space. Intended to be interpretive and educational in nature from a programming standpoint with CCPRC. And then we have our play area, sensory garden, amphitheater, demonstration garden off to the, we'll call it the more eastern side of the site plan. Next slide. Again, this gives you a better idea in plan view of those areas and the connection points. Next slide. Landscape plan, it's still the same type of palette, native, ecological mix. Next slide. Again, just more detail. And this is a fluid design. This is as we kind of work through and get to 100% documents, it's evolving daily. Next slide.
There it goes. It was stuck for a moment.
That's fine. So some of the furnishings and site materials, the top 3 images are materials that are on site. We are going to,
I think it's, you just told her about 5 minutes ago, 15 minutes.
We are going to reuse the existing trough that's on site as part of one of the rain garden features, and try and implement some of there's a lot of granite curbing out there on the property, so we're going to reuse some of that throughout the site. Then our site furnishings that we're looking at. Next slide.
Jenny, you've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. Next slide. I'm going to go. Next slide. Playground, just precedent images. Next slide. This is the overlook. We're looking at a composite decking overlook with steel rod railing, trying to be sensitive, want to be sensitive to the existing tree canopy. So we're looking at a a battered pile system or auger system to accomplish this. And the idea is to tuck it into that tree line. Next slide. And then next slide.
Did you say next slide?
Yes, sir. Next slide. Existing images looking out over the marsh and Old Town Creek toward West Ashley in the bottom right, stable 1 in the top images. Just our site plan for the maintenance area. It's for staff parking for the main house as well. And you can see the pedestrian connection from staff parking to the main house. We have bike parking. Next slide. We also have an existing horse sculpture on site that we are going to reuse and position on the, what we really consider the front side of the main house right there, overlooking the marsh. The next slide. Keep going.
It's your 2-minute warning.
Okay, landscape plan, naturalized trees and larger shrubs. Next slide. Just additional detailing. Next slide. Or dumpster. Next slide. Keep going. One more. That's stable 2 in the picture in the foreground, looking out toward the river, Ashley River. Next slide. Just some additional images, and those stairs right there, we're looking to improve those. Again, just some more imagery of that area of the caretakers. Next slide. Demo plan, next slide. That's the site plan. Basically, it shows you the location of the boardwalk and then the new pedestrian connection to those stairs into the dock area. Next slide. Detail for the swing bench. Next slide. Keep going. That's our boardwalk. Just some details for the boardwalk. Next slide. And the photometric layout, white indicates vehicular lighting, black dots indicate the pedestrian, and then the smaller white with the black outline represents the small bollard lighting, which is very minimal. So the idea is to keep the lighting minimal. We'll have some security lighting at the maintenance area, but that's basically it.
Great. Thank you, Jenny.
It's a lot to go through.
It's good. Are there any questions from the board for Ms. Jenny?
I have one quick question. I know that in the comments we had talked about the plants under the roof lines, and there were some rain chain details in the previous presentation. And could you just talk for a second about how y'all addressed that comment?
Yes. So the rain chains. Well, there's a couple of rain chains on the events pavilion. We have. We're going to secure them to the ground and link them with a under drain, a French drain system, basically, that will take it to an inlet that's part of the events pavilion grading and drainage plan. On the learning center side, we are incorporating that rain chain with the rain barrels that we're specifying, and we're pulling that element of the overflow of the rain barrel into the rain garden itself. So that detailing between the rain garden and the barrels will be tightly integrated from a learning educational experience.
And then as far as the plants under the roof lines where there weren't gutters shown, is that something that has been studied further?
Yes, we do. We have plants at the events pavilion that are adjacent to the foundation of the building. And so we've been able to leave and grade out space between that planting and where those rain chains are going to accept that water, and how it's going to, basically gravity is going to take it to that inlet as well. So you'll have surface drainage and you'll have some of the drainage that penetrates the ground into the French drain. So I think we have sable minor, and we have some of that ecological mix that interacts between the face of the building and those rain chains.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, hearing none, then let's see, we don't have any public comment. So David, do you want to give your recommendations?
Sure. Sure, thank you. This is David Meeks. Staff comments. Number one, the landscape plans have developed nicely. The landscape list and plans that contain the labeled plans are too hard to read. At the next review, please blow up the landscape plans to take up the entire sheet and move the plant list and photos to another sheet, all labeled landscape plans, although plant photos are not necessary at the final review. Number two, staff likes the layout design for the pedestrian entrance, incorporating the historic wall and adding some features such as the concrete seat wall. Number three, double check all plant lists versus labels. For example, at the pedestrian gate entrance, the plant list calls out 46 pink mully grass, which is MUHC, and only 14 are labeled. 11 LORC called out in the plant list, but only 5 are labeled. So just double check all those and make sure they're accurate. Number four, staff likes the proposed auto entrance, the entry gate design, the plantings, and the signage. The signage will need to be submitted separately to DRB at the end of the DRB process for the site and the buildings. Number five, correct a dimension on the main monument sign. There are 2 dimensions given for 4 feet 6, and the bottom dimension is incorrect. Number 6, staff likes the family of wayfinding signs and the materials proposed. These will be reviewed further at the staff level. Number 7, staff approves of the lighting styles proposed. The lighting plan does not look to be too overabundant. Use sparingly and where necessary. We typically like to see a photometric plan at the preliminary review, but given the amount of vegetation screening and the distance from the surrounding area, it should not pose a problem. We ask the applicant to keep lighting levels down to a minimum, as it sounds they are, like they are doing, and provide a photometric plan at your earliest convenience before the final review. With that, staff does recommend preliminary approval.
Great, thank you. Jenny, is there any of those staff comments that need to be corrected from factual inaccuracy? No. Okay. Moving on to board discussion, perhaps a motion.
I remember seeing this before when they were probably just doing that first development. And I guess it's taken them all this time to come back. Is that what happened, Jeff?
Yeah, it's been since January of 2019
Right.
that they presented the landscape plan. But since then, they came back with all the buildings for preliminary approval, which they received. And now they're back for just the site for preliminary approval. So yeah, it's been quite a while.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, it's a good sized project, and you can tell that there's been a lot of thought into it. I appreciate the presentation and appreciate the thoughtfulness and the thoroughness of it. I really don't have that many comments at all personally.
It'll be a beautiful project.
Mm-hmm.
This is Andy. I think that it's really well thought out. Of course, you know, the devil will be in the details as they develop the final plans and implement it. But, you know, I think it's, in my opinion, on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I agree as well. I don't have a lot of comments, but other than that it's very well thought out, and it'll be a fun project. It'll be a great place to go after it's completed for us to do a field trip, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a design review board.
I love it. Well, here, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, Aaron, did you have anything you wanted to comment on?
No,
Michelle?
it's I'd say that as has been said, the biggest challenge is like it feels like there's so many details that need to be worked out and made sure they're thought through, and you know, that's at something this scale, it's hard to dive into them as much as I'm sure we'd all like to. But I think, you know, conceptually, I think it's certainly a really nice design and has the potential to be a great place.
Yeah, big picture, I think it's successful. I would support it.
I'd like to make a preliminary motion for preliminary approval with staff comments 1 through 7 and no board comments.
Great. We have a motion for
second.
approval and a second. Yep, great. And Kristen seconds that. I'm going to take roll now. Andy, you made the motion and Kristen seconded. So we'll move down the list here. Miss Stevens.
Yes, in favor.
Excellent. Miss Smith.
In favor.
And I am also in favor, and I think that covers all of our board members. So the motion passed. Good job. Great presentation.
Great. Thank you, Jenny.
No.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
I'll have a great evening. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
So skipping number 5 and moving on to agenda item 6.
Review and approve minutes from the meeting of August 17th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Miss Stevens, second. Okay. And take a roll call. Miss Smith,
In favor.
Miss Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
myself is in favor too. Good job. Motion passed.
Great. I'm waiting for one of these days somebody to disagree with the minute.
Wait a minute.
That's why you put
There's
it
a
at the
spelling
end.
error on line 10. Rejected. Denied.
Denied.
That's why he puts it at the end of these meetings.
That's right. No deliberation.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
That was a good
you.
meeting.
It really
Good seeing
was.
you
It was
all.
great seeing
Good
you all
job.
too.
Good seeing everybody.
Yep.
All
Yes,
right.
indeed.
Take
See you next
care.
time.
Yep.
Bye.